Bom dia a todas e a todos. Me chamo Silvana Queiroz e, juntamente com a Gisela Zapata, somos as atuais coordenadoras do GT Migração da ABEP. Inicialmente, agradecemos a Carolina Coimbra e a Vitória Prieto por aceitarem participar deste webinário e transmitir os seus conhecimentos. Será uma manhã de muito aprendizado. Agradeço imensamente a Gisela pela articulação com as palestrantes para que este webinário fosse realizado. Também agradecemos a todos que se inscreveram e aqueles que não se inscreveram, mas estão assistindo pelo YouTube. Agradecemos à ABEP por todo o apoio na logística para a realização desse webinário. Gisela, por favor.
Obrigada, Sil. Como é que a gente está de plateia aí, gente? Que eu não consigo ver. Quantas pessoas tem aí no YouTube? Que aquela hora brasileira já sabe, né? Dá uns 2 minutinhos para as pessoas chegar. Cara, e quantas pessoas tem ali? Será que a gente espera uns 2 minutinhos? Ou vamos logo? Ok. Uns minutinhos. Vamos esperar uns 2 minutinhos para fazer a apresentação? Só dá tempo das pessoas chegar e tal. Acho que é melhor. Agora eu fiquei na dúvida, vou fazer a apresentação em português ou em inglês? Estou aqui. Acho que eu vou fazer em português.
Pode fazer em português.
Tá.
Acho que em português, Gisela.
Perfeito. Acho que vamos começar então, gente. Obrigada. Estamos então dando início ao webinar organizado pelo GT de Migração da Associação Brasileira de Estudos de População, ABEP. E o título do webinário hoje é Digital Demography in Migration Studies, Applications and Challenges for Latin America. Temos o grande prazer de ter 2 pesquisadoras latino-americanas conosco. A primeira pessoa a falar é a Vitória Prieto Rosas. Ela é professora do Programa de Población da Universidad da República, em Uruguai, é doutora em Demografia pela Universidade Autônoma de Barcelona e lidera o projeto Using Internet-Based Data to Quantify and Sample International Migrants, Applications to Examine Recent Immigration to Uruguai, financiado pela Sociedade Max Planck, em Alemanha, e pela Agência Nacional de Pesquisa e Inovação de Uruguai. Ela também faz parte do comitê coordenador do projeto de imigração latino-americana, o LAMP, pelas suas siglas em inglês, para expandir as etnoenquestas, as surveys, como ferramenta para pesquisar a imigração na América Latina. Ela é também membro do grupo de pesquisa Caminar, análise comparativa sobre migração e deslocamento internacional nas Américas. As suas pesquisas e publicações têm se focado em temas como inclusão social de imigrantes e pessoas retornadas a países sul-americanos e também na avaliação de dados tradicionais e não tradicionais para estudar a mobilidade humana. Obrigada novamente, Victoria, por aceitar o convite para dar essa palestra hoje. E depois vamos ter a Carolina Coimbra Vieira. Ela é estudante de doutorado no Max Planck Institute for Demographic Research, no Max Planck Institute for Software Systems e na Saarland University. Ela fez graduação e mestrado em ciência da computação na UFMG, no Brasil, e ela tem se centrado em temas interdisciplinares na interseção da ciência da computação e na utilização de dados de redes sociais para estudar a relação bidirecional entre migração e difusão cultural. Novamente, Carolina, muito obrigada por ter aceitado o nosso convite. Como falamos para a maioria de pessoas que estão aqui, no e-mail que enviamos de convite, desde o GT, o objetivo desse webinário, então, é apresentar o campo da demografia digital e seu uso e aplicação ao estudo da mobilidade humana na América Latina. Carolina e Victoria vão falar por aproximadamente 45 minutos e depois a gente vai abrir para perguntas. Pedimos que, por favor, enviem suas perguntas por escrito no chat do YouTube assim que forem surgindo. No final, a gente vai coletá-las e passaremos novamente a palavra a Victoria e a Carolina para responder as perguntas, ok? Também queríamos dizer que esse webinário ficará gravado no site da ABEP e ficará disponível para consulta posterior, ok? Então, passo a palavra à Victoria, que vai falar primeiro.
Bem.
Floor is yours. E o webinário será em inglês.
Well, thank you very much, Gisela, for the invitation and for your kind words at the beginning. I'm very pleased to have this time with ABEP and to share this time also with this talk with Carolina. So the topic will be digital demography and migration studies, and we will discuss some applications and challenges for Latin America. Sorry, I need to share screen first. Okay, there we are. Okay, so for starters, we thought of speaking a little bit about our background or how we arrive into this topic. As Gisela mentioned before, I am a demographer and sociologist, and I am part of the Programa de Población at the Universidad de la República here in Uruguay. And around 2019, I had a chance to meet Emilio Salgani from the Max Planck Institute in Demographic Research and to apply for a call for a collaboration between research groups in Latin American countries and the Max Planck Institute. And then we formed this tandem group between the MPI-DR and our institute here in Uruguay. So we were collaborating since 2019 to February 2024, and a follow-up of this project is the project I am in right now, that is the research group in Movilidad Humana and Demografia Digital, or Human Mobility and Digital Demography, that is now funded by our university here, and it's an interdisciplinary group formed by engineers, and computational engineers, people from urbanism and architecture, demographers, and sociologists. And in one of my visits to the MPI-DR, I had the chance to meet Carolina. We start discussing about this talk and trying to think of an outline of how we can address it, and we find many reflections and common interests. And so this talk will be a bit about that, about our encounter and our way of thinking digital demography applied to migration studies for the Latin American region in particular. So now, Carolina, maybe you can speak a bit about your background a little bit.
Yes, sure. First of all, thank you so much for the invitation. And I just want to say that I'm glad to share this space with Victoria. So my background, as Gisela introduced me, is in computer science. So I did my bachelor's and master's in Brazil in computer science at UFMG. And during that time, I was always fascinated by using social media data to study different kinds of things in our society, and the amount of data actually we share on social media and we could use for different purposes. So in 2019, I came to Germany to Max Planck Institute for Demographic Research for the first time to work on a project with Emilio Zagani. And after that, I came back in 2020 for my PhD here. And at the moment, I'm in this joint PhD between two Max Plancks, one in demographic research and the other in software systems. And as Victoria said, we had the opportunity to meet here, and we have many interests in common, and we are very happy to share some of our researches here today with you guys.
Okay. So to start with, we want to go over some background on the internet and web social media used in the world, and in particular in the Latin America or South American region. So digital demography is a field that is growing and it's in evolution, and it's part of it came up as a result of the large spread of internet and web social media in particular. South America is part of this expansion of internet penetration, and it's one of the regions in the world with the largest penetration rate, just immediately after the European or North American regions. Internet penetration around 2024 in January was about 82% in the region. And Facebook, in particular, is the web social media that has the largest number of users in general. The share of users in Facebook in Brazil, for example, it's above 60%. But if you see the other Latin American countries, in most of them it's even, in some of them it's even higher or larger than that. The use of the other web social media, some of them which are part of the Meta group, is not that large, except for WhatsApp, which is the largest, the most intensively used in the region. But in terms of the other platforms, the first three more relevant platforms, Facebook is still the most relevant, and this is the case for all the countries. So taking into account the fact that internet is definitely something used and that we leave these digital traces in the whole use of the web, but also in particular in the applications in the web social media. Well, many research in the last year has been flourishing in trying to address at least 4 topics and apply to migration studies. So the main groups of literature that we can identify at this moment is, first of all, the literature that works on the validity assessment for estimating migration stocks and flows using, in particular, Facebook data. There are many references. The one marked there in orange are the ones corresponding to our research groups, but there are many other works that mostly applies to the global north. In the case of the references that I just marked in orange, these are the few references that focus in the Latin American region. And I'm doing this remark for you to notice that there is some asymmetry in the expansion or in the speed in which migration studies in the region, in the Latin American region, are incorporating digital media. This digital data has been used, applied to migration studies, mostly to address very large migration flows, most of them related to the global north or involving south-north migration. Little has been applied to south-south migration, and even less to the Latin American region in particular, except for some studies that focus on the Venezuelan diaspora, as the one here by Espiratos and other colleagues. But going back to the structure of this slide and to our idea of going over the state of the art in this realm, we see that, as I said before, there is a block of literature that is the oldest references actually relying to this subgroup, that is the subgroup of literature focused on the validity assessment of estimation of migration stocks. Then the other one is the combination of traditional data and digital footprints for nowcasting and projecting, mostly set into a Bayesian statistical framework. Then the other group is the use of Facebook service used to contact, sample, and address migrant populations and other minority groups. And then the most recent production is now moving into what we call migration and integration research itself. This is more about a sociological approach, perhaps, of or a sociological application of digital data. Questions here bears about what the evolution of structural patterns in migration networks is, whether refugee movements can be predicted, how host communities respond to the influx of refugees, and how spatial segregation patterns of migrants and ethnic minorities emerge, and also other examples as the ones that Carolina has been working on that are more focused on culture effects, how culture affects migration, or how culture impacts migration. We can also think of these 4 topics as an evolution of the field. I dare to think, as other colleagues have mentioned, that these are also like ages of the very young field of digital demography applied to migration studies. At the beginning, logically, scholars were focused on trying to figure out if this is actually something useful, something valid to estimate migration stocks, and to fill that blank, the blank of the scarcity of data that has been characterized the migration studies. But later on, they move into, okay, this definitely, it's valid data and worthy data. Okay, let's start now casting and projecting and forecasting migrations. And now the field is more engaged into using this as a platform to get somehow traditional data, to use it as a sampling framework to conduct in-depth surveys and in-depth research, asking directly to migrant and refugee populations about their well-being, the trends, their plans, and their social relationships. Okay, so what this we think is a little bit, or at least a mild introduction into what is migration studies from the perspective of digital demography. And what we want to do in this talk is now to focus on 3 examples or applications of things that we have been doing, and that we think that fit into this description of the state of the art of migration studies, of recent migration studies from digital demography. The first example will base on validation of Facebook data for nowcasting purposes. It's an exercise that we did here in Uruguay, in collaboration with the Max Planck Institute. Then the second one will be about an application of Facebook data as a sampling frame and I present a survey that we did using Facebook as an outreach and a sampling platform. And then the last one would be an example on Facebook data to study culture and migration that will be part of the research that has been conducted by Carolina. And we think that these three examples, as I said before, fit the first and second group of literature that I mentioned previously, that for the validation exercise. Then the example on the surveys definitely fits this block of literature on Facebook surveys, and then the last one will fit into this literature on migration and integration research. Okay, so on the first example, validation of Facebook data to nowcast migration, there we aimed to compare Facebook data with other traditional sources and estimate the biases and figure out, okay, how much this Facebook data resembles or correlates with other traditional data sources. The strategy was to conduct correlation analysis between given standards, given data standards and Facebook data. And we follow the Saarland, Vieira, and Gumandi approach that was published by them in 2017. This is one of the first papers doing so, and it was published in IMR. And then, well, for that purpose, we ran linear regression models using the standard as a dependent variable, Facebook as an independent variable, and then controlling by origin, destination, age, and sex. I will talk in a minute about what is the standard. And then we explore the use of Facebook data through the daily number of users and the monthly number of users. These are two of the informations that you can get from Facebook. And regarding the Facebook data, that is probably one of the things that most of you are curious about. Well, we access this Facebook data on the number of users of Facebook through a programmatic manner using R and Facebook and the Facebook Marketing API, which is open access. And from there, we access to the number of users, but we also disaggregated this number of users according to behaviors, interests, and socio-demographic characteristics. The API Facebook marketing looks precisely, the Facebook marketing tool, if you try to access it in order to post an ad on something, let's say cell phones or keyboards, you will have a chance to target the population that you will want to reach with your ads. Okay, and the population you want to reach with your ads can also be segmented by characteristics that are relevant for you to sell your product. Let's say the sex of the audience, the age of the audience, their economic position, the kind of goods that they normally consume, their location, and other things that are very relevant for migration studies, such as the countries they were living before. And this is what makes Facebook very attractive, and more attractive than other platforms such as Twitter, for instance. You had a chance to segmentate and have socio-demographic variables of the users. That makes it resemble a little bit to what can be a household survey or census data. And so we program extracts to extract the daily or the monthly number of users segmented by sex, by age, but also by the place of current residence and the place of previous residence. We target one type in particular of Facebook users that are what Facebook has labeled in the past expat users, previously living in some countries. The thing with this is that Facebook does not include all the countries of previous residence. Countries such as Paraguay or Uruguay or Bolivia, which are very relevant for the local migration system, for the Brazilian migration system, or for the Argentine and Uruguayan migration system, are not included as variables by Facebook. But we still have other 13 origins that are very relevant for the South American migration system, such as Venezuela, Chile, Argentina, Colombia, among others. And what we did was to focus on these 13 available origins. Okay, so the data was extracted from December 2019 on daily basis first to 2021, and then from 2021 to 2024 we did weekly extractions. We extracted twice or three times a week. Once we have all this data looks like something like this shown in this graph. This is just an extraction from December, from the 1st December 2019 to 1st June 2021. And here we are focusing on Brazilians on all expats, or something, yes, on all expats for Brazil as a destination. In red, we have the daily number of female users, and in gray, the monthly number of male users. And what we learn by doing these extractions is that, well, sometimes you can see clear trends by looking into Facebook data. Other times it's more about finding noise and things that you have to get rid of. And so it's very important to have long-term extractions to deal with these distortions. I mark here two groups of shocks. The first one here with some balls or round circles. It's showing the shocks that are coming from our own programming strategy. Sometimes we have an expiration of the token, which is one of the permissions that you need from Facebook to do these extractions. These credentials or permissions have some expiration date, and sometimes we forgot that we have these expiration dates, or at the beginning we didn't have enough number of users to do these extractions, and the extractions collapse, and that's why we got this almost zero or very sharp declines in the numbers. Other times we have changes that were introduced by ourselves. For example, here in August 2020, when we decided to expand the extractions, not only including Facebook users, but also Instagram users. That's another relevant thing here. If you use the Facebook API, you can also extract data not only on Facebook users, but also on Instagram users. And the typical question for these kind of talks is, okay, you're using Facebook, but Instagram is the one that is capturing nowadays more the youngest audiences. What about Instagram? Well, we are including also Instagram in the extractions, since Meta owns both applications. And the other example of things that can happen or go wrong, or that you need to be mindful about, is that, for example, in March 2020, there is this sharp increase observed here, for instance, in the trend for the males. And this increase responds not to the COVID pandemic, but to a change that Facebook did on its expat algorithm in that date. Change that, of course, was not announced to programmers, and a change that still is unknown, because how Facebook tag users or identify users as expats, or our proxy for migrants, it's a black box. This is still something that is unknown. There is some documentation, but Facebook has not been clear about how they exactly create these labels. The literature says that it's probably related to the location of the a matrix of locations for previous connections, but also the structure of the social network and the location of the different social members of the social network has also been mentioned at some time by the literature as an indicator or information that could be used by Facebook to derive this, and also where the person created its account and where the person is now. It's also part of the information that might be used to create this tagging on expats. Okay, but the thing is that to deal with what can come from your own programming strategy, but also from what comes from the changes that Facebook does and will continue doing, it is recommendable to have these long-term instructions and have some control over time of what can be changing. In regard to the traditional data that I said before, this whole exercise is about combining both types of data and figuring out how much they correlate. Well, to do that, most of the exercises that have been published focusing on the global north have been using very top quality data, okay? Top quality traditional data, especially registered data. But as you may know, we don't have registered data in the Latin American countries that has been consistently used to address migration stocks or trends. In the last years, to go over the Venezuelan migration, and with the exception of the Brazilian case that have very good quality administrative registered data, the other countries of the region, to go over the Venezuelan exodus, have been using residence permits and asylum applications, but most of the estimates are showing duplicates and triplicates of individuals, because as you know, one individual can issue more than one application to residence and to refugee. So what we can use in the region as a traditional data source is census data, but if we speak about an exercise that was run in 2019 or 2020, there was no recent census data, except for the case of Mexico that was completing it in 2020. Then the household and labor force surveys can be considered as a proxy to gold standard in the region, but as we know, they tend to undercount migrants living in collective dwellings. So an important part of migrant populations living in cities such as Santiago de Chile, Montevideo, or Buenos Aires would be excluded. And the other thing we have is the UN migration stock estimates that at least you can rely thinking that they use a demographic strategy for forecasting, and so they are the ones that we use in one of the exercises. The exercise I will show immediately are using the Mexican census data, the UN migration stocks for the 13 origins and 21 destinations, and the household labor survey data for some of the countries. But none of them really compiles as a gold standard or ranks in a similar position to the gold standards used in previous exercise, focusing in other regions of the world. So that's one of the particular local challenges that Latin America has to go into this use of Facebook and other web social media data as relevant data for migration studies. But okay, so these are the results for the exercises using household surveys and UN migration stock estimates. And what we see right there is each of the squares shows a destination country, and the dots are the origin countries. They are split by sex, males and females. Males are round and females are a triangle. And this is an identity line. Okay, so if something goes below the identity line, that means that the Facebook estimates are probably higher than what is observed using the other standard. Okay, that in the standard, sorry, that in this case is the household service. The other example that we have on the right is using UN migration stock estimates, and again, what we find is that in most of the cases there is the dots are below the identity line. And in terms of correlation, which is the information that we extract from the linear regressions, not from this plot, of course, we see that there is very high correlation between either household service and Facebook or UN migration stocks and Facebook. It's around 70% in the case of household service and around 80% if we look into the UN migration stock estimates. Okay. Here we see some results where we are disaggregating or addressing the specific biases by origin, by age, and sex for different definitions of migration. In this exercise, we are using the Mexican census data to do this assessment or validity assessment of the Facebook data. As I said before, the strategy here is to predict the census migrant stock using Facebook as an independent variable. It is the number of expats as an independent variable, and we control by sex, age, and the countries of origin, but also by internet penetration rate, which is information that can be extracted from the census in this case, because the Mexican census asks people about their use of internet, and you have then internet penetration rates that are disaggregated by country of origin, age, and sex. And the relevant thing here is that in the previous exercise, you are only looking into an absolute definition of migration, okay? You are looking into people according to their place of birth. That's absolute migrant definition. But here we are looking into specific or different definitions of migration. And this is made possible thanks to the different questions that the census asks and the different constructions of migrant that you can come up when using the census. You can think of migrants by country of birth, as in the first definition, of migrants as recent immigrants by country of residence, by using the question on the place of residence 5 years before and the time of migration, similar to the third definition, but in this case by country of birth instead of by country of residence. And then the other three definitions are about recent immigrants who in 2015 were residing in their country, recent immigrants residing in 2015 in a country other than where they were born, and then recent Mexican returnees. And the results show that one of the best fits could be found here in the second definition or in the first definition, in the absolute and recent migrant definition. And though the best R-square value is observed for the first definition, immigrants by country of birth, the one case where you have a significant effect of the log of expat users, this is a Facebook predicting variable, it's for the second definition. So from this paper, we concluded that the Facebook expat construction resembles much more the recent immigrants by country of residence that you can get from the census data. But still, in all of the cases, you find very good fit between Facebook data and census data. So key findings from these kind of exercises: Facebook fits reasonably UN household survey and census data. Overestimation with respect to survey and UN migration estimates is what we found in general. This contrasts with the results found for exercises that have been using the American Community Survey or the European Survey. In that papers using those data sets as traditional data sets have found underestimation of Facebook to capture migrant populations. The underestimation respect to census data for Mexico exercise, however, is similar to the findings for the European Union and the US, which pose us the question about is this a matter of overestimation of Facebook, or is this a matter of Facebook data, or is more a matter about what are really gold standards for us? We believe that probably if we run these exercises using census data for Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay, and other countries, we will find results that will resemble more to the one found for the census, to the one where we use the Mexican census data. So we tend to think that we will find underestimation respect to the census data. But what matters here is not necessarily the direction of the biases, but the possibility of having access to these biases and measuring these biases, its magnitude, having this age and sex and origin specific biases will enable us to correct what we can have from Facebook, what are daily number or daily figures for migrant stocks derived from Facebook that can be later corrected and used to have nowcasting in reference to the other standards, in reference to what would be the bounds posed by household survey or census survey. In all the cases, in all the exercises, we didn't find significant differences by sex, yet by age, especially in the census. And then the other relevant result is this one regarding the fit, which is better for recent migrant definition. And this can be saying that, okay, Facebook is better in capturing recent migration than capturing long-term migration. And I will pass to the second exercise. I don't know how much time, if I am okay in time, please, Gisela, let us know. The strategy here in this other exercise has been to use Facebook as a sampling and outreaching strategy to contact migrant populations. And here we use Facebook to contact migrants during the pandemic in 2020, when there was no other way to conduct in-person surveys or other kinds of surveys. And in 2022, after we have very good results in 2020, we move forward developing a strategy of post-stratification. We definitely use Facebook as a sampling framework. And once we got the results, we build up weights to take the sample and make it more representative of the universe and full population. Then we check whether expat users are actual migrants, place of birth, place of residence, place of previous residence, interest related to country of origin, place of birth and residence of respondents' mothers were asked. And these questions were included because of the things I mentioned before, that are what are the things that are that the literature says that Facebook has been using to identify or mark expats. We wanted to check whether the structure of the data in the end shows that these are definitely things to discriminate between an expat or not, or a migrant or not. So what we did is a campaign posting ads for Cubans, Venezuelans, Dominicans, and Peruvians in 2020, and then for Venezuelan, Cubans, Argentinians, and Brazilians in 2022. We end up with around 1,000 surveys in 2020, and with around 2,500 surveys 2 years after. And we use the segmentation strategy to fill the different quotas or stratas of surveys that we wanted. This is males or females for one origin or for another, for some specific age groups. And in the case of 2022, we also included quotas to target in particular parents, which is also another relevant socio-demographic information provided by Facebook, because the second survey was also funded by UNICEF, and UNICEF wanted people that actually have children. But what I'm showing here is the results for the surveys, showing that we get quite similar age structures using the Facebook strategy of outreaching and other surveys. This is the household survey, the official household survey for Uruguay for the same year. This is the ethno survey on recent immigration conducted in Montevideo in 2018 using respondent-driven sampling. And this is a very this survey was conducted on the basis of a very careful strategy, trying to take care of privacy, and even though we still get similar results than the ones obtained with the Facebook strategy. And these, as I said, are the results for the Cuban community and the Venezuelan community. Then in terms of educational attainment, we also find quite similar structure of responses for the Cuban community, not so similar for the Venezuelan community, where we have a significant overrepresentation of very highly educated respondents of Venezuelan origin, either in the Facebook survey, MiCovid survey, or in the ethno survey of recent immigration. And in regards to the year of arrival, according to different data sources, we also find that there is a certain similarity in the responses obtained using Facebook and other sampling strategies used in the ethno survey for recent immigration. So to conclude, we've concluded that Facebook is provides an economic way to outreach migrant populations as compared to other sampling strategies. Important to say is that we spend a tenth of the budget used in the ethno survey for recent immigration when we were using the Facebook survey strategy, and we get a larger number of the respondents using Facebook. Then, well, very similar response distribution for questions asked in other person surveys, and then Facebook is important to bear in mind that performs very poorly in recruiting the most vulnerable communities of Peruvian and Dominican origin in Uruguay. That is why I'm not showing results for them, because we didn't have enough number of cases for those community. But a similar result was found even using RDS with the communities in the recent ethno survey conducted in 2018. So this might not be any specific bias of Facebook, but maybe something related to the behavior in general of this community and their attitudes towards surveys in general. So now, Carol, it's yours. I stop sharing.
All right. So now I will talk to you about the third example we have here to share, which is on exploring Facebook data as potential for measuring cultural similarity between countries and the impact of culture in migration. So the strategy here is to collect the number of monthly active users on Facebook and their interests around different topics using the Facebook advertising platform, measure the cultural distance between countries based on these users' interests, and validate this measure of cultural similarity with other measures derived from surveys or social media data, and assess the impact of adding this cultural similarity to predict migration flows. Then the first question we raise is how to measure culture. And the traditional way is via sampling surveys, meaning that cultural aspects of a country would be represented based on people's response. As a big example here, we have the word value survey. Although these surveys, they are widely used, they have some important limitations, especially the time and high cost needed to run these surveys. So to overcome some of these limitations, what we propose is a passively collected data from social media as a complementary approach to characterize and measure culture across countries. So here, for those who are interested, you can scan the QR code and check the paper. In this paper, we propose the methodology to measure cultural similarity between countries. And I will explain shortly the steps we involved in this methodology. So first, we selected food and drink as a cultural marker, and we collected more than 700 interests on Facebook related to food and drink. So for those of you who are not familiar with the Facebook advertising platform, basically we can collect the estimated number of active users who matches some demographic characteristics such as age, gender, and interests, in this case related to food and drink. So here I have a screenshot as an example for you. So you can see that in Brazil, we have from 31.5 million to 37 million users, Facebook users interested in beer. So we collected the audience or the number of Facebook users interested in those more than 700 foods and drinks. And for each one of the 16 countries here, we collected the top 50 foods and drinks in each one of these countries. So for example, in Brazil, we have açaí, in Mexico, we have quesadilla, and so on. So now that we have these top 50 foods and drinks in each country, we can represent the country as a vector, where in each position in the vector, we have the proportion of Facebook users interested in each one of those foods and drinks. So the first representation here contains 394 foods and drinks, corresponding to all the top 50 foods and drinks we identified for these 16 countries. So here, what we did was we applied the principal component analysis to reduce the dimensionality, and we also ran classifier to, we also ran a cluster algorithm, K-means, to cluster these countries according to their food and drink preferences. And then here you can observe that English-speaking countries are together, some Asian countries are far from the others, and also we see some Latin American and European countries close to each other. So as a validation step here, we compare this map we created by ourselves with Facebook data with the word value survey cultural map that it's proposed based on the word value survey conducted globally every 5 years or so. And then here we observe that they also cluster countries according to some cultural characteristics. And we observe that the English-speaking countries, they are identified in both maps, the same way as the Latin American countries, they are also clustered in the same cluster in both maps. So another way to represent these countries could be as representing a country as a vector of 50 dimensions regarding the top 50 dishes on the same country, for example, representing Brazil in terms of the top 50 foods and drinks in Brazil, or representing Brazil in terms of the top 50 foods and drinks from Argentina, and so on. So here we have this other representation that we call the asymmetric cultural similarity, where for each pair of country, we have two measures. One is the cultural similarity considering dishes, popular dishes from the first country, the other one considering the top dishes from the second country. So to give you an example, I will focus here in Australia, because in Australia, we observe that when we select the top 50 foods and drinks in Australia, we see that the row representing food and drinks from Australia is full of reds, or a cosine similarity that it's pretty low, meaning that Australian foods and drinks, they are not very popular in the other countries. So Australia is cultural dissimilar to these other countries, considering Australian top foods and drinks. On the other hand, if we look at the second column that also represents Australia, but now the cultural similarity between Australia and all the other countries in terms of these other countries' top foods and drinks, we see that actually now we have a column full of blues indicating a high cosine similarity between Australia and these other countries, which means that Australia is similar to these countries in terms of their popular foods and drinks. So what we did after that, after proposing this methodology and measuring cultural similarity between countries, we wrote a second paper where we actually added this measure of cultural similarity into a model of into a gravity model to predict migration. And I will present quickly some of the findings here. So first of all, I would like to mention that a gravity model, they usually include some static and symmetric variables to predict migration, but we all know that migration is dynamic and asymmetric. So the migration flows from Brazil to the US, it's not the same from the US to Brazil, right? And then we decided to include this measure of cultural similarity because we believe that these cultural attributes, they are sensitive to change. So it would include some dynamic variable, and also because the cultural similarity can be asymmetric, as I showed before in our matrix. So this is basically the equation for a gravity model. Meaning that migration flows, they are estimated based on the population, area, and distance between countries. And here I would like to show some of the references that I used for each one of these variables. And we tested different configurations of models, including, for example, shared language and shared history, and some other variables indicating cultural similarity. And finally, our measure of cultural similarity that I just presented. So we ran, first we correlated all these variables, and we observed that our variables is actually positively correlated with migration flows, migrant stocks, shared language, shared history, and all the other variables for cultural similarity derived from surveys or social media data. So we ran some cross-validation and some models, and the main conclusion here was that our measure of cultural similarity derived from Facebook data measured on food and drink interests explain migration flows comparably to standard predictors such as shared language and shared history. So if you are interested in knowing more, I show the QR codes. Feel free to go back in the video and scan them if you are interested in reading more about the paper. And now I will turn back to Victoria for the concluding remarks.
Thank you, Carol. It's not sharing yet. Okay, there it is. Thank you. Okay, so over these 3 examples, we think that there are some things that can be concluded globally. Well, through the first example, I think that we showed that Facebook data turns out to be a relevant data source for the assessment of migrant or the stock of Latin American countries. But also we learned some things about the gold standards in Latin America, or how to reproduce these kind of exercises used already many times in digital demography applied to migration, that do this comparison between what is the new data or the non-traditional data and what is called traditional data, assuming that this traditional data is a standard or can be considered as a gold standard. For us in this region, it's very hard to find something to name as such as gold standard, and that affects the scope of the conclusions that you can reach by replicating these kind of exercises. For example, we are not so sure if we found underestimation of Facebook in respect to the UN estimates or the household surveys, or that there is underestimation of migrant populations by the UN and the household surveys. At this point, both things could be likely. We are assuming that probably the second it's going on by looking at what we found when we do these exercises using what we in this region still consider the gold standard, that is the census. But to have more data in this, we still need to wait until the different statistical institutes of the region release the microdata of the 2020 census round. For that purpose, in Uruguay, we are doing data extracts of Facebook disaggregated by the first and second administrative units for Brazil, for Argentina, for Uruguay, for Chile, for Bolivia, and Paraguay. And we did these extractions on the very same time that the census operations were conducted since 2023, and some of them in 2022. And we are currently doing so for Chile, for the Chilean operation that is ongoing right now. And we plan to continue doing these comparisons now against what we still believe is the gold standard. But as someone was saying before in the chat, we have challenges now posed even on the census, because most of the census for the first time are also moving into digital. So the omission rate for some of the census, at least what we heard from the Uruguayan case so far and the Argentinian case so far, are larger than the omission rates found in the previous editions. So we wonder, is this still a gold standard? Well, something still to continue arguing about. Then we also learned that Facebook works as a reasonable outreach platform to recruit some migrant populations. It works similar than other platforms or than other surveys we have. And we found that in the same way that, for example, an ethno survey had issues trying to contact some hard-to-reach populations, well, Facebook has. Using Facebook as a platform to do a campaign and trying to contact this population, you can find the same kind of challenges. But the truth is that with the populations that are easy to contact, Facebook works faster and cheaper. And then the differences in the structure of the responses is not are not that big or are not that large. So we conclude that it provides a non-random sampling strategy with chances of correcting for biases through post-stratification, and that is sometimes better than running surveys using snowballing in migration studies, which is something that we see quite commonly. And Facebook data is also a relevant data source to study cultural similarity across countries in a timely, cost-effective, and reproducible and scalable way, as shown in the examples displayed today by Carolina. Cultural similarity measured by food and drink interest on Facebook explains migration flows comparably to standard predictors such as shared language and shared history. This makes it a very interesting tool to study diasporas in general, and to having all the caveats that Carol mentioned, consider it as a tool to also go over assimilation and integration in migration studies. And then we we think that there are some questions that are relevant to pose into the inclusion of Latin America in this digital demography and migration studies are questions that are coming from our Latin American experience in trying to do this. One of them is this one I just posed before regarding what is a gold standard and how to run validation exercises when you do not have that, when you when you still have doubts about the traditional data sources. And the other one is that our migration system, the Latin American migration system, of course, has very large flows, but also is compounded by minor population groups, by minor flows. And as we know from as migration scholars, minor groups of migrants are very relevant as they can lead to, in the future, to new migration routes, to new and eventually turn into big migration flows. And so this difficulty into working with minor population groups, because some of them are not included, for example, some origins are not included on Facebook, or because there are some limits in the disaggregation of the data extract by sex, by age, and by other sociodemographic characteristics. It's something that is challenging, and you run the risk of focusing only on the big populations or in the large population groups. And then we also think that there is a need to stretch to stretch the dialogue between different disciplinaries. This kind of research is not possible if you only work with demographers. This talk by itself was not possible if you only talk with demographers. This is a field that definitely needs a very continuous and intensive dialogue with a computational engineer, but also with anthropology, and also with all the different perspectives that can contribute to understanding of how people use social media, which kind of people is excluded from social media, and what social media is actually telling about migration, or has to tell to the migration field. And this dialogue is not only necessary between disciplines, but we believe that it's also relevant between generations. In demography in particular, it is hard to arrive into these topics given the education or the formation in the demographic analysis that most of the demographers have, that was coming from different generations of from older generations of demographers, much more settled into a critical view of the data. That critical view of the data is fantastic, and it's absolutely necessary to move to move the lenses towards the the assessment of migration using digital demography. But it is necessary to speak the same language, and all the challenges in terms of programming, in terms of economic capacity to have projects that are able to allocate all this volume and amount of data, makes it necessary to have a dialogue that is involving all the different generations, and to make some transformations even in the education or the teaching of demography. Okay, so well, that's all. Thank you.
Nossa, fascinante. Obrigada, Victoria, obrigada, Carolina. Acho que temos já uma lista de perguntas. Eu só queria fazer um comentário, né, para dizer que, evidentemente, essa apresentação deixou claro, né, o potencial dessas ferramentas da demografia digital para estudar os movimentos populacionais na região. Então, assim, as potencialidades são enormes. Vamos abrir aqui, porque já temos várias perguntinhas. Então, pedimos que, por favor, façam suas perguntas no chat e eu vou tentar lê-las aqui, ok? Eu vou lê-las em português, como elas chegaram, mas, de qualquer maneira, Victoria, se precisar algum esclarecimento, você me fala, tá? Então, estou vendo aqui, já colocaram, olha que bonito. A primeira pergunta é do Alberto, do NEPO. Até onde vai a definição de digital demography? Microdados dos censos, por exemplo, não seriam digitais?
Uhum.
E a outra pergunta dele é: teria alguma metodologia para estudar migração interna com essas ferramentas? Acho que vamos responder essa primeiro e depois a gente segue com as outras duas perguntas que estão aqui no chat. Vocês duas podem responder um pedaço cada, ou como vocês preferirem, tá?
Carol, do you want to go ahead?
I think you can start if you want.
Okay. Hi, Alberto. Nice to read you. I would. It's a very interesting and tricky question. I would say no by looking into the definition of digital demography, but that's but we can think of a lot of questions as migration scholars to how was the implementation of the digital census, but I will still think that that's not necessarily part of the field, because the field itself is defined by its methodologies, by the application of computational tools and a particular type of statistics into the field, by the use of big volume of data. And census itself, though it's big and it's probably one of the largest operation for demography and for, if we look into traditional data sources, I still think it doesn't account as such. And then in regard to the study of internal migration, I've seen some applications, or I think that's the team from Francisco Rowe in the UK. It's trying to do something like that, but using Facebook information by itself, it's not that Facebook will provide information on mudanzas or migration between one administrative unit and another one, if you're talking about units that are below the country level. But it's true that Facebook includes a question our interest that is recent mudanzas or recent, but it's more about residential mobility. And we have doing extracts on that question, and the data looks very funky. I wouldn't use it. What I think that other people are doing is that they are doing extracts at the first administrative level, and then they are doing this over time, and from there, from these stock matrices, they are trying to infer migration flows. So I hope this responds part of the question, Alberto. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe to add something on the internal migration, there is something to consider in the platform. When you collect, for example, monthly active users, there is always a lower bound of 1,000, so you can never target very specific groups or like very small regions, because if you try to be that specific, then you will not get data. There are some studies. It wouldn't be internal, but I think the methodology could be applied similarly on now casting migrants for the. I know a recent paper from people from Oxford where they actually now cast migrants, Ukrainian refugees, and a similar methodology could be. They are using for the Israel now, and it can be used in many contexts. I think it's much easier in a situation of crisis like that, because then you have like these massive migration flows, and then could be a source for to take a look for internal migration as well. And maybe something about digital demography. I agree with what Victoria said. It's not only about the data, but also the methodology you are applying in computational power and so on. And maybe something else to add to this definition, something we are constantly talking about. It's the digital trace data that it's always in part of our research, because it's the idea of repurposing the data that comes from social media or a digital context, that it's not used, was not produced for the use in academic research, but we repurpose this data to use for that. So maybe it's also one of the characteristics, or one of the tools that we are actually using in digital demography.
Obrigada, gente. Tem uma outra pergunta aqui da Rachel. Ela pergunta: Carolina, será que as empresas não podem impulsionar essas informações de consumo por meio de propagandas pagas direcionadas pelos algoritmos de acesso?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So what I would say here, of course, Facebook advertising platform is a black box. So we don't know, for example, how Facebook inferred these interests, because these interests, they can be inferred by Facebook. Then we have no idea how they are doing that. But part of them can also be informed by the user. If you like a web page for like a beer brand, for example, or like a post and so on. So that's how Facebook would infer that you are interested in beer. But one thing that I would like to mention here is that we are not launching any advertisement on that. So what we look for is the estimated number of people who would see this advertisement if we target people, for example, living in Brazil, interested in beer. So I don't believe it's we would have people being targeted by being interested in beer otherwise. So what I mean is that I don't think people would get to be interested in beer because they were targeted somehow, because they have to show some kind of interest before. So if I got your question correctly, I don't think they would be shown these ads unless they showed Facebook some kind of interest in those things we are targeting. But yeah, if I didn't get your question correctly, you can send it, or I'm happy to keep in touch if you have more questions.
Obrigada, Carolina. Tem uma outra pergunta aqui, mas eu não tenho certeza, acho que está meio cortada. Aí fala, também utiliza outras plataformas de mídias sociais, Instagram, X, WhatsApp, Telegram, TikTok, etc. Pergunto porque há diferença de uso das plataformas. Imagino que a pessoa está se referindo àquilo que você estava falando anteriormente, Victoria, como houve uma mudança, por exemplo, nesse harvesting de dados, porque vocês incluíram, de fato, também, a partir de certo momento, dados do Instagram. Então, talvez a pessoa perdeu, não sei se você pode falar um pouquinho mais.
Sim. Well, of course, there are differences in the use of platforms, but still we have been going over the World Value Surveys or the Latino Barometer, and still Facebook is the most important app or the largest use after WhatsApp, which is the number one, of course, in Latin America. But there is no, I haven't seen any research using WhatsApp as a tool to have figures on the number of people with certain characteristics. WhatsApp has been used, as I heard, but in a more qualitative approach. Please correct me, Carol, that I know you know much better than I on this, but I know that that's the kind of research that has been done using WhatsApp, more inclusion in certain open groups of WhatsApp and assessment of the trends in the discourse or in the narratives and in the conversations of a group. Similar use to the one you can observe using Twitter, for example. And regarding Telegram, I would say it's the same kind of approach that I just mentioned for WhatsApp. Regarding TikTok, also I've seen more qualitative assessment of the data, but no assessment on the characteristics of the users itself. And I think that is because sorry, but I'm just running out of battery. But I think it's more about the characteristics of the API for these different tools. Facebook, it's not only the second most used, but it's also the one that has an API that is open access and that has very thorough information about the socio-demographic characteristics of the users. Even on Twitter, there is a lot of research on Twitter, but you don't know anything about the users itself. You know about their posting, their behavior in the network, but you don't know about you have no information to approximate if they are expats, migrants, or male or female. The sex you know, but nothing else, no other than that. Okay, so that's why we haven't mentioned them.
Ótimo, obrigada. Gente, se ficou alguma dúvida, por favor, coloquem novamente no chat, se ficaram com alguma dúvida depois da resposta, ok? Aí o Gilvan, nosso colega no Cedeplar, tem uma outra pergunta e comentário. Parabéns pela apresentação, Victoria. Em que medida o uso de Facebook pode ajudar na migração interna? Acho que um pouco parecida a pergunta que o Alberto fez antes. Pergunto isso porque existem dados alternativos que não são digitais, como os dados educacionais longitudinais, que nos ajudam a achar padrões e corrigir níveis. Além disso, em que medida podemos usar a validação para ajudar a entender problemas de cobertura no censo. Depois tem outro pedaço, mas acho que eu vou deixar essa pergunta primeiro e depois eu leio o resto.
Well, I think that regarding the internal migration, I already responded. But how is that we can entender problemas de cobertura do censo using this information? We still are figuring out how we are going to do it. But so far, what we are doing is what I said before, is that we are extracting the data at the same time that the census operations are run, because we would like to replicate the exercise that we did for with the Mexican census, that gives these results that are very different from the ones you will get using the other standards. I think that the approach will be the similar, but at the end of the day is how, I mean, who has the truth? Like Facebook definitely has not the truth. You know, it has biases, but the direction of the differences and how these behave specifically by age, sex, and origins may help you to understand also what's going on with the census at some point. I think that this census wave is very tricky because it's different from the other census waves in most of the countries. But I still don't have an answer for that. We're just thinking on gathering the data, and once we have the other data, open the invitation to everyone that wants to collaborate with us into asking these questions. And I really want to use this space to open this invitation to the Brazilian colleagues, because we have been doing these extracts at the national level and the different states for Brazil, for a selection of origins, and this time for the whole population, because we are also thinking that we may do some exercises to validate other demographic behaviors other than migration. Okay, just have a look at the age sex structure that you will get from one state using the census, and the age sex extraction that we will get using Facebook. We don't know really how this will help, but we think that it might have some use in the future. So everyone is welcome to use this data, which is open access data, and the project is happy to share.
A terceira parte do comentário do Gilvan. Achei fascinante a ideia do potencial dos dados de redes sociais como uma population framework para a amostragem de imigrantes e para a calibração de amostras, usando a estratégia de ranking. Fascinante. Eu acho que ele está pensando, nesse momento, em uma pesquisa que a gente fez recentemente para Acnur, ONU Mulheres e UFPA, que é representativa para a população venezuelana residente no Brasil. E, na hora de fazer, na realidade, é a terceira onda de uma pesquisa que a gente vem fazendo desde 2021, e nessa última rodada a gente teve muitos problemas para conseguir chegar no total, né, para conseguir achar as pessoas que tinham sido selecionadas nessa amostra representativa. E no final a gente gastou um tempão, mais de um mês, 2 meses, tentando reponderar, basicamente, os dados com base no que a gente conseguiu, as opposed to, né, o que a gente tinha, o que a amostra representativa dizia que teríamos que atingir em termos de representatividade, né, sexo, enfim, das diferentes categorias, etc. Então, acho que é isso que ele tem em mente, mas não sei se vocês querem fazer algum outro comentário sobre essa questão do uso dessas redes sociais como um population framework para calibração, etc.
Sim, I would say that more than the comment on calibração, I would highlight the idea that this is a very powerful tool when you are precisely in that kind of situations, when you need to target a very specific population group, let's say elders using a specific device, or migrants that have children and that are from a specific origin, or you have a strata that is childless people, male childless people in some specific age group, well, it's a very, very powerful tool. All of us that have been doing field work for interviews, for focus group, for face-to-face survey, we know how hard it is to find or to fill the targets when you are at the end of the field work. And this helps you very much to sharp the pencil and to go precisely into that spot. Not without money, because this is a very cheap strategy as long as you are not in that spot. When you are into that spot, that's the moment when you spend most of the money in the campaign. At the beginning, you feel very quickly, as in the other fieldwork, you feel very quickly the quotas with very low budget. But then when you when your paladar gets exquisite, then then is when you have this problem, and when you spend a lot of money trying to target that. But still, this money is always lower than the budget that you will be spending in another fieldwork, and it's less time consuming. So it's both things together. I always like to emphasize that it's a powerful tool for sampling, but also to outreach. You are doing both things in the same place, right? And that's very powerful.
Great. So Giovan also comments, Carolina, parabéns pelo seu trabalho. Além de digital raking, ou racing, acho que era raking que ele queria dizer, qual o potencial... Ou tracing, Qual o potencial do uso de dados não estruturados para análise de corpos sobre motivações, intenções e conexões migratórias, a partir do conteúdo das postagens e respostas aos comentários?
Thanks for your question, Jovan. I can mention... I can mention a lot of research on that, actually. But let's just start first by, since you mentioned analyzing the content of posts and answers, you mean the text itself. So let's think about which social media you could actually get data on this type of content. And then the most popular one, I would say, Twitter, that now is X. Recently, they shut down the API, so it's not possible to get that data anymore. But there are still a lot of research going on Twitter or X, whatever you prefer to call them. Some people still refuse to say X. And then most of the research in terms of content analysis and textual analysis, I would say it's on X. But regarding intentions to move, I can also mention some works from my colleagues here at Max Planck. So they have work on LinkedIn to analyze intention of workers to move, to relocate and move to another place for work. There are also some research using Google data, Google Trends data, and Wikipedia data as also an indicator that someone is willing to move given the searches they are doing. Also, now that the X, also for Facebook, actually, it would be nice to have access to that data, but that data is private, so we cannot collect textual data from Facebook or private information or profile information, at least not in a using the API. Of course, some people scrape the web pages, but that's not the recommended methodology. And finally, because also I mentioned about the API, the X API, that it's not possible anymore without paying a lot. I would also like to tell you about a new possibility that some people are conducting their experiments now, which is data donation. So you can actually request your data from any social media, any platform that you have an account, and you can donate this data for research. So I know already some groups that they are relying on data donation to get this data from people, this private data from people. Of course, you need to apply for the ethical board in the institution and so on. And all the data has to be anonymized, but it's a possibility now since all the APIs are making things a bit harder to get data or shut down. It's also a possibility that some researchers are moving to this direction of data donation. So if you are interested in more, I can send you some papers on that. But I would say that X was the easiest platform until a few months ago to do all this kind of analysis, both textual analysis and also network analysis. There are some great papers on that, but unfortunately, it's becoming harder and harder for researchers to get access to that type of data through APIs.
Obrigada, Carolina. Aí depois a pergunta da Vanina é: how can I get the Facebook Free Access API?
Yeah, so if you have a Facebook account, that's the first step. I can, well, it's not feasible to do a tutorial now, but I can, if you send me an email, I can send you the link to some step-by-step how to get the access to the API. But basically, if you have a Facebook account, you can already use the platform the way I showed in the screenshot. If you go to the platform, you can check the audiences there. But then if you want to collect, and especially if you want to collect a lot of data, then you would need a token and an ID. And I can send you the link how to get those.
Okay. Ótimo. Victoria está compartilhando imagino que tutorial para fazer o using o Facebook API.
Yes.
Então, se puderem, por favor, Cari, colocar lá no YouTube, seria bom.
Great.
Ok? Tá. Obrigada. Cari, tem alguma outra pergunta? Acho que, por enquanto, não tem nenhuma outra pergunta. Então, eu vou abusar aqui da minha posição de moderadora para fazer duas perguntas. Ok. A primeira pergunta ainda não fica muito claro para mim como é que a gente identifica pelo Facebook, né? O que é essa definição de expat? Qual é o time frame que o Facebook usa para determinar que uma pessoa morava em um outro lugar e agora mora em um lugar diferente, né? Ou em um país diferente, no caso, né? Não fica muito claro para mim qual é o time frame, onde que você faz o corte. É 1 ano, são 5 meses, são... E isso é com base em que exatamente? É no que a pessoa declara ser o país de origem dela, na atividade que é monitorada ao longo do tempo no Facebook, enfim, isso não fica muito claro. E a segunda pergunta ou comentário é que eu fiquei pensando, uma das conclusões, né, que vocês apresentam no final é que o Facebook é relevante para o assessment, né, das populações migrantes na América Latina, porque quando você vai e compara, por exemplo, no caso do México, como vocês mostraram, os resultados são similares em termos, por exemplo, do perfil sociodemográfico das populações que vocês conseguem achar né, ou da análise feita com os dados do Facebook e vis-à-vis o censo. Então, a minha pergunta é, se isso é assim, a gente poderia, em algum momento, então, começar a usar, por exemplo, o Facebook para fazer surveys que sejam representativos para essas populações? Foi.
Carol, do you want to respond? Or what do you think?
I think you can take this
Okay.
one.
Okay. The first one regarding the definition, nobody knows actually the time frame. That's why we are doing this reversal engineering, trying to figure it out, because the Facebook documentation is not as specific about us. And I know it's hard to understand that a whole research field is building up on this black box. But that explains why the first age of this migration research using digital data, specifically Facebook, it's about figuring out how is that algorithms operate and how is that algorithms are tagging individuals and building up these variables. It's hard to figure it out from a perspective from the social research or from scientific research, where you go from a concept and then you operationalize this concept and transform it into something that is apprehensible and measurable. This is not the approach we can use here. It's the opposite. You are figuring out, having the data and trying to reversal engineer what are the concepts behind it. And some people even say that Facebook even doesn't know how the algorithm operates. Otherwise, they would have revealed it. So there are markers and elements that seems to be waiting here or being relevant in this construction, but it's not that clear. And that explains why we need these assessment exercises and why we need to obtain these parameters that measure the biases and capture them and are as sex and age and origin specific as possible. Is that clear, Gisela?
Yeah, but in any case, when you go and extract the data, right, you are effectively extracting the data only for those people who are labeled as expats.
Yes, and you don't know what is the time frame.
Exactly.
But
so you just know the Facebook filter that for you.
Yes,
but you don't know exactly what it is, the definition behind it.
You don't know how, you don't know how is that you know that someone was living at some point in another place, but you don't know when.
When, okay. Yeah.
But that will as a demographer, that will pose you in the position where you ask, okay, is that they are thinking about the place of birth, the place of previous residence, the place where it has the largest community of co-nationals. It's just a place the person visit. I understand that from migration perspective, it's very hard because for us, it's not just a change in the administrative unit, it's about time too, but you don't have the timing.
Yeah.
And that's why we did the Mexican exercise, trying to see, okay, there is some fit in the data, but which definition of migration better fits this data? In appearance, it's the one that is recent, this meaning people moving in the last 5 years. That's the one closest to this.
Yeah, okay. So I guess the whole point of comparing with the census data will be how close, basically, exactly, resembles the population that we find in the census. And that's where my second question then enters into the picture. So if we effectively have a country where we know, right, that the profile of the people that we're capturing through this expat or whatever filter on Facebook, right, and we know, right, that this is pretty much, right, the same or the composition of that population is very similar to what the census tells us it is, can we then go on to do representative surveys on the basis of, you know, the population that we can recruit through
yes,
Facebook?
I think you definitely can, as long as you have measured the biases. as long as you have measured and know how far you are from the truth. But then again, and this I think is the Latin American challenge, what is truth?
Okay.
Because we never knew, we never had something that was really the truth. Okay, that's for me is like the big lesson learned from this exercise, because actually I never question our data. I never dare asking questions about the validity of our censuses, but when you start asking about questions about the validity of these things that you definitely for sure don't trust, is digital data. Of course, this is not the truth. But then you figure out that you don't even have something true. And I like something that Emilio Sayani said in most of his talks, and I think it's very powerful, that he explained. You probably, Carol, have heard this example about the mirrors, right? Like if you go into a fair, in this carnival fair, and you in Uruguay we will say a kermés. I don't know if that word rings a bell in Portuguese, probably not. But Carol, if you have the word in Portuguese, please bring it to the front. But if you go to a place and you have different mirrors, the mirrors that make you fat, the one that makes you long, the one that transform your face, what is the actual mirror, right? What is the true image? And that's what all data sources are about. In fact, all of them are mirrors. The point is that there are narratives that make us believe that these are well established. And this is the narrative of the generation that has been teaching demography to most of us, people in the 40s. Okay, our mothers and fathers, our parents in demography have taught us, and this is fantastic. And I really think you need to find this standard. But then, in a more postmodern world, you figure out that there are not really standards, right? So that's I would say one of the concluding remarks of our experience, or at least from my experience approaching from formal demography this field. More questions than answers, as usual.
Yeah, but we do know, at least based on the research that you guys have been doing, is that probably the estimates by the UN are underestimations of the migrant population. Okay.
In fact, we also figure by using them that they were corrected. The traditional demographic methods applied for some origins due to the increase in migration for Venezuela, but also Syria, but also many flows that were related to refugee crisis. They added up into the demographic estimations. They added up a bulk of asylum applications, and the number is exactly the one that you get from UNHCR.
Okay. The difference.
So they were correcting, and they were not correcting systematically. They corrected on an assessment of what is migration crisis.
Okay, excellent. Ok. Cari, tem alguma outra pergunta por aí? Se alguém tiver alguma outra pergunta, bom, acho que não tem mais perguntas. E já estamos chegando na hora. Então, gente, eu queria agradecer novamente, né, por terem aceitado o convite. Foi maravilhoso essas 2 horas que a gente passou aqui, aprendendo um pouco sobre as aplicações da demografia digital para o campo da mobilidade, né, do estudo da migração na América Latina. E só lembrando que o webinar fica gravado aqui no YouTube da ABEP para consulta. Acho que é isso. Fiquem seguindo a gente nos nossos canais para as próximas atividades. Agradeço novamente e até mais.
Obrigada, Gisela.
Obrigada, gente.
Não, Silvana, muito obrigada.
Só esperar um pouquinho para não cortar o live. A Kari vai falar para a gente.
Então, ok. Obrigada, Vitória. Obrigada, Carolina. E aí, obrigada a Gisela pela articulação, né, na organização desse webinário. E obrigada a todos que assistiram e fizeram as suas perguntas, e à ABEP pelo apoio técnico.
Uhum.